Get ready, because today I'm gonna change your entire worldview. We recently crossed 7,000 subscribers, and I don't even know how to put into words what I feel, but thank you so much, and I hope you're enjoying the content. But the reason I bring this up is because I'm pretty sure like 90% of you found me through a style study, because I've probably analyzed the work of some of your favorite artists. Over the last year or so, I received a fair few DMs asking me how I do my style studies, what I look for, what my thought processes are, and how I just put it all together based on a stylized piece of work. Now, initially, it did trigger my insecurities to consider doing this video, but I realized over time that I am not that kind of person. I am not the trade secrets kind of artist and content creator, and I don't want to be. It works for a lot of people to hold their cards very close to their chest. It's just not me. So today I'm gonna break down for you exactly how I analyze an art style, what I look for, how I draw conclusions, and how I've used this entire series to take my art from looking like this to looking like this. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, there might actually be a fun little group project we can do together. As always, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, because yeah, I'm still a little scared to put this video out, but I hope you enjoy it, and let's dive right in. I always like to do a quick disclaimer at the start of every style study that this entire process is purely for us to learn from some of our favorite artists. I see so many young artists trying to copy the style of their favorite artists, and while that is the best kind of practice, it is very important to draw the distinction between their style and your own. So I'm just gonna do a quick blanket disclaimer. Do not use this video as an excuse to rip off your favorite artist. You probably won't do them very much damage, but you are doing a huge disservice to yourself and your creative potential. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's level up your study process. You see, the vast majority of my analysis skills I've found come from taking English language in GCSEs and A-levels, and there was this whole section called writer's analysis where you take a piece of prose or poetry and you analyze like the wordplay and words and phrases and what they mean and why they've been used, but more importantly, you understand the intent behind using certain words and turns of phrases. And that is exactly how I approach studying an art style. Now, I can't condense 4 years of school learning into one video, but I'm gonna try and explain it in as much detail as I possibly can. Before I do anything else, I like to write or type up a very rough script. Now, this is where I pick what artist I want to study, usually from your request, and I pull up their Instagram feed or look them up on Pinterest, anything that is super visual, and I start to take notes. Now, this is where the analysis is born. There are 4 very important questions I always ask myself when I'm analyzing someone's art style, and honestly, I suggest writing these questions down just so you can look at them when you do analyses of your own. Here are the 4 questions that I ask myself. Say you're scrolling through your IG feed and this painting pops up. I don't even need to look at the name to know it is Loish's work, but why is that? What is it about her art that makes it instantly recognizable? In this case, we know and love the proportions that Loish uses. In the case of Sam Yang, it is that beautiful warm lighting. With Ross Tran, it is super smooth skin and those magical lighting effects. Julia Razumova's work almost always has that super high exposure and close-up phase. So that is the surface level stuff that you first notice. But one recognizable feature does not a style study make. We want to train our brains to look deeper. Let's stick with the example of Loish today. What are some other recognizable features in her work? Well, for one thing, there is pretty much always a strong silhouette to her characters. And even though a lot of the colors are saturated, All of them seem to really pop without crowding the scene and making it look like a rainbow threw up on it. All the elements are cutesy, almost like you would see in children's illustrations, but the art is very much grown up and edgy. However, the edges don't really feel staccato because there are lots of long flowy lines that create like graceful movement around the composition. The compositions themselves are funny and interesting. Either the humans are relatively tiny or everything else in the universe is supersized, and best of all, she includes some strong glowy elements in the painting. Those are my favorite part. So I start off by making this initial list of things that make her art instantly recognizable. Then we move on to number 2. This is a little harder to explain because it is so intuitive, but this is the part where you start to think about what it all means. The art style, not life as a whole, that's for a different video. First of all, forget everything you know about behaving yourself and controlling your thoughts and approach the paintings that you're looking at with a child's mind and curiosity. Look at one painting to start with and think about what the story is. What does it tell you in terms of a narrative? Here, for instance, I see a magical wildling who is deeply in tune with the forest around her. She lurks in the shadows, but her glow forces her to stand out. Here we have a character who is basically drowning in her robes, almost disappearing into them. Everything around her is super dynamic and vibrant, and yet the stillness of her skin forces her to stand out. Here our character is up among the clouds, and while her hands and legs and clothing and hair seem to kind of camouflage into the clouds, it is the orange glow of her face and aura that force her to stand out. Now put the 3 paintings together and oh look, you start to see a pattern. These are all stories of characters trying desperately to fit into the background, but their own unique features force them to stand apart from the crowd. That right there is your running theme. In your study, you might find several running themes. That's perfectly fine. Make note of each one. That's more stories for you to learn from. Next, ask yourself which of the things that you listed out in step 1 actually made you feel an emotion. Now, personally for me, while I do love the neon colors that Loish uses, what really gets me is the supersized stuff. I have severe megalophobia, which means that if something is like unnaturally large, it makes me feel like I'm falling. There was this movie, Life of Pi, I don't know if it was like an international thing, but I remember watching it in 3D, and it's about this guy who gets stranded in the ocean, and there is this scene where this giant whale comes up and like tips him out of his boat, and honestly that is like the worst thing I've ever seen. No offense to whales, I'm sure they're like beautiful and serene and calm and ancient, but like stay away from me. I am horrified of things that are huge. Anyway, wow, tangent. But the point is that the one thing about Loish's art that made me feel the strongest emotion is the supersized and naturally large fruit and animals and fishes and that kind of thing. Now, that could be intentional, but it could also just be me projecting my fears onto a painting. But I feel like that is like the beauty of art, is that it is such a communal and personal thing at the same time, and that's the kind of thing you want to carry over into your own style. Be as dramatic as possible about the littlest things. I feel like too many of us look at paintings as happy little accidents, but I've learned quite early on to look at art through the lens of nothing is an accident. If you think the curtains are blue because they echo sadness, then they are. If you think the sun is shining to show joy and happiness, then it is. Look at each point you noticed and think of the why behind it. I explained each point in the style study, but for instance, one of the things we noticed in Loish's work is a strong silhouette. To me, that means that A, the focus is on the character, but B, the character is a strong, noticeable element in that universe, which leads me to the possible conclusion C, the character doesn't fit into the world that they're in. Now, draw conclusions like this with all of the features that you listed out in step 1, and that's basically everything you need to know about a style. However, there's 2 more really important things I want to tell you about today. Now that we know the story and meaning, it is time to analyze the visual details. In order for this step to come naturally to you, you need to understand shape language, basic facial anatomy, and the basic stylization methods. I covered basic shape language extensively in my Encanto video, so hopefully a lot of you have seen it and remember it, and I'm not going to rehash it here today. Facial anatomy is something I hope you already have the hang of, because it's very important to know realism before you learn to stylize. Because stylization is basically when you take realism and either mess with the timeline of it or aim for perfection. So if you have big eyes, round features, and everything is placed quite low on the head, that's a classic baby face, as in you've messed with the timeline. If you have softly blended skin, smooth hair, and lots of specular highlights, that's aiming for perfection. Sometimes stylization goes the other way, where the character is made to look old and worn with tons of imperfections, and those are stylistic choices you see in the work of Emelina, for instance. Another thing to consider is the line work. Is there visible line art? Is it choppy and harsh, or do you have long, smooth curves? Are there more lines in some areas and fewer in others? Line art adds definition, but hatching adds texture. Some styles don't have any lines at all. These are the more subtle aspects of what makes up a style, but you'll see that if you get rid of them, the style is just completely different. Every single aspect of a good painting is deliberately chosen to serve the story and purpose. Find a running theme in the visual details and you'll have figured out exactly how your favorite artist thinks. I call them details, but really this is the bulk of the story. Look at the color palette, lighting setup, scene composition, and so on. Is there a noticeable era of clothing and architecture across the artist's body of work? Are there commonly used color schemes? Do they use complementary tones, analogous palettes, or split complementary colors? Can you find a specific lighting setup that occurs in the majority of the painting? It seems like a bit of a nitpicky step, but these details are what keep the painting together. You could check to see how these details come together to tell the story, or if you want to be smarter, work backwards. Use steps 1 to 3 to figure out the story, then check to see how the details enhance the narrative. Honestly, this is my favorite part of the process because I get to either have my initial impressions validated, or I get to learn something that completely changes everything I've known about art. Before finalizing the script, I like to do the study portion of a style study because it helps me understand if there's anything more about the story and design that I can learn by replicating a painting. And then I sit down and type up the entire script, which isn't really a fancy process. It's just me sitting down, staring at a computer, typing away for hours on end, though I do occasionally perk up for the memes. And then finally, I apply all of this to an original painting of my own. This is the whole point of style studies. If you skip this part and resort to just copying someone else's style on all your future artwork, I'm sorry, but you've kind of missed the whole point of style studies. So let's look at how I use elements from each study to improve my own personal art style. Today we're working with the word prompt swallow, and this felt like the perfect prompt to fill with Loish's style because for the first time in a long time, we're actually going to paint some birds. When it comes to integrating aspects of someone else's style into my own, there are a few things I like to remember. The first is the proportions. How do the facial proportions in their art differ from my own? With Loish, we obviously know that she paints large round eyes and all the features are placed really low on the face. I do this to a certain extent already, but style studies are the perfect opportunity to really push it even further and just see how far we can go with the proportions while still keeping it believable. Next, I consider colors and lighting. What sort of color palettes do they go for, and which ones do I go for? Most of the time, it isn't too much of a change. A lot of artists use similar color palettes and make similar lighting choices, but in this case, instead of having a fairly desaturated palette with a single solid pop of color, Loish actually goes for multiple saturated neon tones, and that is something I've always been a little afraid of because I fear that it will make the painting too psychedelic looking, but again, this is the perfect time to experiment. If it works for your favorite artist, that means it can be done. So we're gonna experiment with saturated reds and oranges and also a vibrant blue. And finally, I look at the rendering. I like to start off painting the way I usually do until the piece is about 80% done. So we have our colors, lighting, and forms in place. Now we can try and create the textures that Loish has. I do notice that she uses lots of flat shapes rather than having very much soft airbrush blending. I do the same, but my edges are different. Loish uses clean, smooth edges, while mine tend to be fairly textured, so I'm going to go around with a brush that has a more even edge and clean up a lot of the edges, especially in the skin. I also went in and created those H-shape highlights in the hair, because that's an effect I really love. And that is the whole point really, is to find little tweaks like that you really love and would really enhance your skills and your painting. If you can replicate the effect without needing a step-by-step tutorial, then you know you're a step closer to discovering your own unique style. And that's really what style is your own unique mix of techniques and designs. But style doesn't just happen out of nowhere. Like, you don't just wake up one day and know exactly what your style is. It is something that evolves over years of practice and learning. I've been at it for over a decade now, and I still don't know if I have a style, let alone what my style is. And I think this is an important thing for you to know. Don't be hard on yourself if you don't have a unique, recognizable style yet. It just means you haven't learned everything you need to learn yet. And I think that is an amazing place to be, because it means you still have infinite possibilities of what your style can actually be. So yeah, I hope this video has helped give you a little more insight into what I like to look for while creating style studies and how I use them to learn and evolve my own style. And here is this week's painting, Swallow, loosely inspired by the art of Loish. Just like drawing or painting, style study is also a skill, and I find that the more of these I do, the better I get at identifying details and patterns. If you've never done a style study before, let's do a group project. I'll tell you which artists we're going to cover next week, and you can go ahead and make your own list of things you find in their style, and then next week I'll do my list and I'll put it in the video and we can compare notes, and we'll see if we've all found the same things in their style. And if you found something that I haven't, you can leave it in a comment below, and we can all use the comment section as free learning material. It's a fun little way to exercise your visual library rather than just look at some cool art and hope you'll learn from it by osmosis. So without much further ado, next week's artist is gonna be Laura H. Rubin. I'll leave links to her art in the video description below, and whenever you have a moment, I highly recommend making a list of maybe like 4 or 5 aspects, and next week we'll sit down and compare notes and see if we all saw the same thing in her art or if we all saw just completely different things. So yeah, this has been a pretty long video, so that's all I have to say about how I actually do my style studies. I hope this video has been insightful and that it's kind of changed how you see your study process. If you enjoyed this video and learned something today, then please remember to like and subscribe. And which artists are you gonna study first? Let me know in the comments below, because I'm curious to know. You can always grab even more tutorials every single week over on my Patreon, and come say hi on Discord or Instagram. I'll leave all of the links in the video description below. And with all of that said, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out some actual style studies up here, take a crack at the homework, and I'll see you next week where we just kind of hang out and compare notes. I'll see you there. Bye.